All right, guys, so we're back today with chapter 6, the second part of it, and you have 3 objectives for today. You need to, first of all, be able to identify principles of growth and development. Number 2 is to identify stages of human development, and number 3 is identify developmental stages that occur throughout the stages of life. So yesterday we talked about ways that we classify our patients, and we talked about the differences between acute, chronic, and terminal illnesses. So make sure you kind of review that and get that in your head. Today it's kind of a completely different topic, growth and development. So a lot of times you're going to hear these 2 words put together, growth and development, and they're going to be used that way, but they actually do mean 2 different things. Growth are the things that happen to us physically. You getting taller, gaining weight, all the physical changes that happen in your body, that kind of thing. Whereas development are the psychological or social things that happen, the way that you think, the way that you behave, and changes that happen as far as that goes. Now, there are some principles of growth and development that you need to make sure. So first of all, everybody from the time that they're conceived to the time that they die are going to continue to go through growth and development. You may not physically grow taller, you may not physically change a lot, but throughout your entire life you will continue to grow and develop in different ways. So it's kind of weird to say it like that, but it is really true. Secondly, things happen in a step-by-step progression. So there's certain things that you have to do before you get to the next one. So for instance, you learn to crawl before you learn to stand, and you learn to stand before you walk. Otherwise, you end up with a baby who gets halfway out on the floor and say they learn to walk first. If they would have learned to walk first, they'd walk to the middle of the floor, fall down, and they wouldn't be able to get anywhere because they wouldn't know how to crawl. So things happen in a certain order. And you learn to walk before you learn to run, that kind of thing. So that natural progression of things. The third principle is that things happen from, first of all, simple to complex. Second, from head to toe, and from the center of the body outward. So think about you when you were little. You learned to speak small words before you learned to speak sentences. Head to toe, trying to think, you learn to control your head when you're a baby and lift your head up before you learn to walk. Okay, so that development naturally just is a principle of growth and development. You learn from head to toe first. From the center of the body outward. If you've ever seen a little baby playing, they play with things here in front of them first before they start playing with things out to the side, or they'll play by themselves when they're really younger. They could care less if there's another baby sitting beside them. Eventually that changes and they'll interact with people off to the side and that thing. So simple to complex, head to toe, and from center of the body outward. And then the last principle is that everybody grows and develops at a different rate. Okay, that is always going to be true. Whether you're siblings, cousins, parents, okay, everybody, each individual will grow at their own rate. So there are some stages of growth and development that we're now going to talk about. So infancy, toddlerhood, preschool, school age, adolescence, young, middle, later, and older adulthood. So let's look at the very first one, and that is infancy. This is from birth until about a year old. This is a time period in life where the physical changes are most rapid. Think about all that happens in that first year of life. The amount of weight that a baby gains, the length that a baby gains. They learn to hold their head up, and then they learn to sit up, then they learn to crawl. Some maybe even learn to walk by the time that they're 1, if they walk early. Things are accomplished weekly or monthly. They go from eating just milk to maybe eating rice cereal, that kind of thing. They begin with smiling and laughing. They start recognizing their parents and their siblings. They can, by the time they're 1, maybe even say simple words. So there's a lot of things that happen during this stage. Then they reach toddlerhood. So from about 1 to 3 is considered toddlerhood. Now physical growth slows down a little bit. And some of the things or developmental tasks, things that kind of like make it ready for the person to go on, that we talk about in toddlerhood are toilet training or potty trainings. And that really happens because of a development physically inside the body. The muscular and nervous systems develop, and it allows then the child to have control over their bowels and bladder. So that's kind of like a developmental task for that age bracket. They start learning to talk about their emotions. They can say they're sad or that they're scared, things like that. Now, when you're dealing with somebody who is at this age level, you have to keep in mind that things are going to be scary for them. Think about if you're trying to start an IV, or you're trying to give them medicine, or just being in a doctor's office where it's like small and enclosed and people that they don't know. So it can be very scary. So you have to keep that in mind when you approach a toddler and you're taking care of a toddler. You can't just go in and do what you need to do. You kind of have to work your way up to it, that kind of thing. After toddlerhood comes preschool age, and that's 3 to 5. So a lot of things happen in here as well. At this point, kids are typically independent with going to the bathroom. At this point, they went from learning to go to the bathroom to now being able to do it themselves. Your book says they learn to tie their shoes at this age. I'd have to disagree with that, but that is what they say is one of the developmental tasks of this stage. They start to become aware that there's a difference between boys and girls, or they might say, oh, that's a boy toy, or that's a girl toy. I don't want to play with girl toys. I don't want to play with boy toys, that kind of thing. They start developing a conscience, and they start to be able to follow rules. You we'll see this with kids. Like, I told you no, and they'll know that they're not allowed to do something. They have to learn to follow those established rules during this age, or that developmental stage. After preschool comes school age. So these are 5 to 12-year-olds. So think about it as maybe like elementary school age. There will be some physical growth spurts in here where kids get taller, maybe gain weight. There's a lot of improvement over this time period in writing and drawing abilities. Think about from the time you started kindergarten to even the time that you finished 5th grade, and how much your writing changed in that amount of time. Now, as I'm sure you guys may remember, it's during this age that the kids really seek approval from authority figures, so their teachers, their parents, as well as their peers. Their peers' opinions are very important to them. They want to fit in and that kind of thing. They also develop morals during this age, so that they know that there's right and there's wrong. Now, the interesting thing with this age is that there's really no gray areas, like either it's right or it's wrong. There's no kind of iffy areas. If you ever dealt with a younger school age kid and you maybe said that you're planning a party but don't tell, and they think it's a lie, well, they can't really understand the difference between that and lying about, stealing something. Okay, so there's no gray areas. It's either black and white, yes or no, yeah, true, false, that kind of thing. Also in this age is when spirituality and religious beliefs kind of take hold. They start to develop a concern for other people, other animals, and that kind of thing. Then we reach the stage which you guys are in, and that's adolescence. So this is from 12 to 20 years old. This, we say, starts about from the onset of puberty. There can be quite a few physical changes during this time, especially as you go through puberty. Psychologically, you guys know this is a stormy, they say, describe it as a stormy time period, but you know what that is. One day you're friends, the next day you hate each other, the next day you're friends again, 2 days later you don't like each other again. You know, that kind of like ups and downs and moody type kind of things. The adolescents become self-conscious about their changing bodies. They have an increased awareness of their own sexuality, and they start to question authority figures. So you don't need that approval from mom or dad, and you don't need that approval from teachers as much as you did when you were in elementary school. That stuff, all in this age, you guys should figure that one out, because that's where you are, and you probably can really recognize all those things I just talked about. Next is young adulthood. So believe it or not, I'm still considered a young adult according to your book, because it is 20 to 40 years old. This is probably the more stable time in life. By this time, you've developed, supporting friendships and relationships with people. There's not a lot of physical changes that go on. You don't all of a sudden hit a growth spurt when you're 30 or anything like that. By the time that you've reached young adulthood, you've reached your height. You're not going to grow any further. But it's kind of like that stable time in life. Next, we're going to move on to middle adulthood. This is 40 to 65. Typically, this is when you're going to find people at the height of their careers, so like they're achieving their highest success that they've had in their careers. But at the same time, they may find themselves having to take care of their parents who are now getting older. Physically, there's changes happening. You may notice signs of aging, like wrinkles, their hair turning gray, things like that. Women will go through menopause during this age, this developmental stage. So for those of you who maybe don't know what that is, you may have heard people call it the change or something like that. But that is when a woman will no longer get her period, so therefore she's no longer able to have children. You'll see women say they got hot flashes, things like that, and have to fan themselves so they get hot all of a sudden from changes in hormones. But that happens during this middle adult time period. So typically people are still in good health, but those chronic illnesses that we talked about might start creeping in that have been developing over time, like hypertension, diabetes, and things like that. Now, the last two stages can be confusing. I remember that L comes before O alphabetically to keep them straight in my head, so if that helps you, you can use that. The first stage is later adulthood, 65 to 75 years old. This is when, chronic illnesses are definitely going to be showing up, high blood pressure, heart problems, things like that. Their strength starts to go. You may see physical changes in things like hearing and sight. Think about older people, they can't see as well, they can't hear you, they might ask you to repeat things a lot. It's also during the stage that people typically have to start dealing with the loss of people around them, maybe their spouse, maybe a close friend, and so forth. And then the last developmental stage is older adulthood, and your book classifies that as 75 and up. they have a real positive developmental task for this age bracket. They say that the developmental task is to prepare for your own death. They are starting to depend on other people. They can't necessarily always take care of themselves anymore. Their health is starting to fail, but they do tend to enjoy sharing stories with younger people. That's why you like the people in this age bracket. When I was in school and I had to walk uphill both ways to school, that kind of thing, where they like to share stories and enjoy the company of younger people. All right, so any questions on that? Shoot me an email. Otherwise, we're going to finish up chapter 6 tomorrow by talking about some human needs. See you then.